If you want to start hearing yes every time you close, you need to start doing this. No exaggeration. I can attest to this. As a top sales rep in the country in the financial service industry, number one rep in my organization, and that company was the number one ranked financial service firm in the United States. High ticket sales. I can tell you firsthand, this is the way to do that. Now, there are psychological levers that all high-level salespeople, they know about, they use daily when they're speaking with prospects, and they work. Sales is psychological. Making a decision to buy is 80% emotional and 20% logical. When you understand this and you know the psychological levers that influence people to buy, selling becomes fun. It becomes easy. There are two psychological levers that are used the most in sales. You'll hear one of them a lot, which is loss aversion, which is actually one of my favorites. But I'm not going to talk about loss aversion today. I'm talking today about the contrast principle. The contrast principle, hands down, my favorite, and is the reason why I had the highest close rate in my organization. Now, in order for you to really grasp the concept of how this works, I'm going to read you this story. It's a letter that I pulled from the book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. If you've never read it, it's worth a read. He talks about the 7 levers of influence. Amazing book. But this letter is from a college student written to her parents a year after going to school. Now, she hasn't spoken to her parents in 1 year, and she sends this letter. Pay attention because the contrast principle is on full display here. Now, she says, "Dear Mom and Dad, since I left for college, I know I haven't written you, and I'm very sorry. But let me bring you up to date. But before I do, I want to make sure you're sitting down. In fact, you are not to read any further until you are seated. Okay? Well, I'm getting along pretty well now. The skull fracture and my concussion when I jumped out of the window after my dorm caught fire is pretty well healed now. I only spent 2 weeks in the hospital. I can almost see normally now, and those crazy headaches I was getting, they're almost gone. Fortunate for me, when I jumped out of the window during the fire, it was witnessed by a gas station attendant who called 911. That gas station attendant visited me in the hospital, and he was so kind that he invited me to live with him in his apartment since I no longer had a place to stay. It's not really an apartment, though. It's more of a basement, but it's really cute. He's a very fine man, and we have fallen deeply in love, and we are planning on getting married. We don't have an exact wedding date yet, but it will be before my pregnancy begins to show. Yes, Mom and Dad, I am pregnant, and I know how much you guys are looking forward to being grandparents. Now, the reason why we haven't gotten married yet is that my boyfriend has a minor infection that has prevented us from passing our premarital blood tests, and I carelessly caught that infection from him. Despite that, I know you're going to welcome him in with open arms. He is kind, although he is uneducated. He is ambitious. Although he is of a different race and religion than ours, I know that will not bother you. Now that I have brought you up to date, I want to tell you that there was no dorm fire. I did not have a concussion nor a fractured skull. I was not in the hospital. I am not pregnant. I am not engaged. I am not infected, and there is no boyfriend in my life. However, I am getting an F in general biology, and I want you to see this failing grade in its proper perspective. Your loving daughter, Sharon. Do you see what was done there? She's failing general biology, but she's got an A in psychology. In contrast to the horrible set of circumstances that Sharon had described, that F in biology was minimal. In fact, as a parent, if I had read that, I would have been like, you could have been failing all your classes so long as none of that stuff was true, right? Do better in school. I want to see your grades up, but thank God that's not the case, right? Thank God those things were not true. That is the beauty of the contrast comparison, okay? So the way to apply this in your sales career so you can have the highest close rate you ever had before is we have to create a contrast between their current state, also known as their status quo, and their future state. Specifically, what their future state will look like with our solution in play. The way to accomplish this is that you have to ask questions that gets the prospect to open up in dialogue in 3 areas. Number 1, the problems that exist in their current state. They have to open up and start describing them. Number 2, the pain that is associated with those problems. And then step 3, this is where most salespeople fail. They don't do this part. You need to get the prospect to open up about how those pain points and problems are making them feel. Okay? Now, next, once you've done that, you then ask questions that gets the prospect to open up in dialogue and describe how they will feel if your solution were to eliminate those problems and as a result, eliminated the pain tied to those problems. Now, that's the contrast. In order for you to do this successfully, you don't just do this once, you don't just do it twice, you do it as often as you are able to, from the start to the end of your discovery and engagement phase. When you do this, though, when you ask for the business, when you finally ask for the sale, you will be met with an emphatic yes. The coolest part about this is that when you've created enough contrast between their current and future state, prospects will at times, and when you get really good at doing this, they will do this most of the time, they will disregard their objections and their concerns. Again, these are objections or concerns that previously were holding them back. They will disregard them or minimize them because, again, by contrast, that future state is so desirable. Now, this is just one psychological lever. Again, there are several. If you want to see a video where I cover another psychological lever that is used by elite salespeople to have the highest close rate amongst their peers, if you want to see that, I want you to like this video, comment close, and follow the Clever Closers channel for more videos just like this one.